Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not to Comic Book. This being a show where we talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Batwoman. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, I love that we opened up to Sophie watching a scary movie, and lo and behold, who's on a couch with her? Alice. It's so interesting. 99% of the time you'll see Alice in her, her Alice in Wonderland get up. And, those, dresses and skirts that she typically wears. And it's just so interesting to see her in regular clothes. In particular, Sophie's ex's clothes. So I was like, oh, that's interesting. What's his name? Tyler? I believe that's who they were talking about. But, yeah, it's just, you never see her in just, casual wear like that. So that's got to be so interesting. And then, just like her being like, yeah, I drunk all your Pinot. You drunk all that? It's like, I'm sorry, I didn't know it didn't have your name on it. This is my place. Everything has my name on it. So I love that they kind of have this room, it was almost like a girl hangout type of situation. Almost like a sleepover type of thing, and I love that aesthetic, and just I love that it's right. It's I guess it's meant to be kind of this disarming aspect of man, don't forget for a second that Alice is a psychopath, but oh man, isn't she quirky? Wah wah. It's kind of like that, where I think it's kind of a little bit of that coming through. But obviously, Ryan's yo, we got to go investigate something. They think it's Catwoman's whip, but it's not. It turns out. Because it's interesting, because it's oh, where is Catwoman? Because it's right, Ryan's yeah, Catwoman and Batman had a thing, and she's really? I wouldn't have thought that was leather, how do you make that work? It turns out, she stole nanites from Bruce, so that's why her whip is actually invulnerable because of nanites inside of it, which I'm oh, that's so interesting. I wonder, because her whip is typically, I don't know, I've always thought her whip was nothing but just a regular whip. I don't know if that's just something they're doing for this continuity, or have there been instances where her whip is made from a special material or something, or will it have nanites? I'm curious, because any Batman stuff I've ever had encountered Catwoman in has never really gone into the whip being anything other than, like I said, a whip. So I think that's interesting. I did like the other name drops we got this episode, because Alice went to visit Montoya at one point in time, and obviously learn about potentially who could be behind it. So no Magpie, no who was the other? Oh, Whip, and then Talia, which I'm hey, we know Talia too. That's interesting. It makes you wonder when. Obviously, it had to be when she got banished by her dad. Because I was about to say when did? Well, because we know Talia's out there and about because of Arrow. But yeah, it's hey, Talia, that's pretty cool. It also makes you wonder. It's was that a post-crisis thing of Talia maybe in the previous timeline had no connections to Batman. I think she probably always had. It's so interesting they would mention that too, because the Catwoman gets brought up, and Talia, because if I'm not mistaken, and I could be, he has kids by both of them at different points in the comics. Obviously, him and Talia have Damian, Robin number 5. I always forget. I believe he's number 5. Yeah. And also, I don't remember Catwoman and his kid. So I just thought that was kind of interesting. But also to find out the main reason why this is all happening is because Montoya and Poison Ivy. I'm dude, interesting. Because once again, in my head, because of the Harley cartoon, the Harley Quinn cartoon, but I guess even in the comics, I think they've made this more of a thing too. It's Harley and Ivy. I guess that's been a thing even in the comics. I guess, because my thought was I wonder, did that originate in the comics before it became a thing even on Harley Quinn? And so I was oh, but Montoya and her, I was that's fascinating. That's really interesting. Because there was something there, but then there was a guy who experimented on, which I'm oh, does that typically happen in her story? Because I think most of her stories, she's the reason why she becomes the way she does, doesn't she? But it's nah, some other mad scientist dude made her into what she was, and a lot of who she was got chipped away. She always cared about the environment, but she wasn't thinking clearly, and just all became who she became. So it's so interesting, because obviously this isn't even our first live action Poison Ivy. Obviously, a lot of this episode I'll make ties back to Gotham, but that was our first, since Uma Thurman Gotham was the first time we had gotten a live action, and even that was a complicated thing because like she kept rapidly aging over the course of the show. But nevertheless, so it's like, it's not like even this is our first like live action run in with Poison Ivy subsequently, since it's like, no. But nevertheless, it's interesting to know that that's why Montoya is doing all of this, is because she's trying to find, because it's, and I love that Alice is like, yeah, Batman was boring and never killed him. I was like, so do people not know about the Joker? Once again, is that something they retcon? Because I want to say, once again, I could be mistaken, but I swear that came up post-Crisis, where you had Luke tell Kate, oh, you haven't seen the Joker for a while, have you? And kind of, you know, and like, oh, like, she wasn't the only one because she had killed Cartwright. It's like, you're not the only one that's crossed that line. Bruce did too. So not unless that's something that I got redcon, but it's like, right, not everyone's going to know that. Like, Luke would know that because that was his, you know, he was Batman's partner, but it's like, no one outside of that would know, like, oh, Batman's crossed that line, but he didn't kill Poison Ivy. He locked her in a place, like, underground, away from, like, the light and water. And it's like, how would you know? It's like, because I told him to. It's like, wow. That's got to be complicated. So I guess it's like, to an extent, you're trying to make up... I guess maybe, like, she doesn't know where Pamela was, like, hidden away. The only person who would know is Bruce, and he's not around right now. So, I guess, like, maybe that's what she was hoping to do. Get, like, Poison Ivy's vines so that she could use it to potentially track down where Pamela was, because she talked about the fact is that she was young and unexperienced last time, where she didn't know how to help Pamela, but I guess she's thinking, like, I'm older, I'm wiser now, I know how to, like, make that happen. Also, there was this line from Alice that I thought was so interesting. She had made a point where she was talking about, like, oh, like, it's like, yeah, Ryan was talking something about Catwoman and Batman, and she's like, yeah, I thought heroes didn't do that. I wouldn't know I'm a villain, but I was like, at first I had to stop. I was like, they're not referencing what I think they're referencing. Because at first I was like, if you don't know what I'm talking about, there was a whole thing, like, a couple months back about the Harley Quinn situation, about, like, right, for season 3 they wanted to animate, was it Batman going down on Catwoman? I'm like, I don't think that's them referencing that, but my mind immediately went there. Like, I don't think that's what she was referencing. I think she was just talking about, like, I don't know. Like, my brain can't help but go there. Like, I mean, it is enough time have passed for it to be a situation where they could have easily written that into the script, you know, because that could have been like a wink, wink, nudge, nudge inside joke there. But I'm like, because that's immediately where my mind went. But she could have been like, that was my interpretation of that line, but maybe she totally meant something else. But that's immediately where my mind went. So I thought that was interesting. Sadly for Alice, it turns out, cool, she's not just over, because she thought, like, oh, like, now that she was spending time with Sophie and everything, she thought she was good. But it turns out, no, she's not. So she goes to visit, Mary, but then because Mary's doing an autopsy on the victim. But it also turns out Mary's got a whole bunch of plants growing around, and Alice is like, what's up with that? It's like, oh, I was able to save Jordan because of the plants. And the moment she's, like, making, like, references to plants, even kind of being like, oh, yeah, Alice, what was it she was saying? That you buried this seed in your garden. It was like, you're making a lot of garden puns. And then she's scratching at her arm, and then you see, like, Alice is noticing, oh, something's off here. And it's like, right. So it seems like Pamela... It's like, right, the plants will only die if you found someone else to infect. So I guess it's like, maybe she's eventually trying to get, like, I guess, like, Mary's almost becoming like a worker bee, and will eventually find her way to Pamela and release her. So, spoilers are not really, because it's been up here. Like, this is like the casting thing I learned about way in advance that I didn't want to talk about. Because I actually don't even remember, and I'm kind of fine with it. The actress who I don't think she's someone I'm familiar with. I remember looking into it a little bit. The actress who's cast as Poison Ivy in this, I guess she's going to be like the main villain, since they are doing a lot of setup for her, which I think is kind of fascinating. Well, it seems like they might be setting something else too, but we'll circle back to that later. But I guess maybe she's going to have, like, Mary be kind of like a worker drone and find her and release her and set her free so she can wreak havoc on, destroy all of mankind and what they represent, and, you know, them slowly killing, you know, nature as poison ivy is opt to often do, kill humanity for what they do towards nature. So we'll have to wait and see. But Alice isn't too concerned the moment she hears from Montoya, like, oh, this only happens when someone's infected, and she smiles because she's like, yes, because I guess it's like, right, this is another bargaining chip she has up her sleeve, or maybe she's like, right, I can use this as an opportunity, because it turns out it isn't just the meds and stuff and just Arkham in general that is making Alice sick. It's something else, because Mary was like, oh, it's basically because all the death and destruction you've caused, it's basically come back to bite you in the ass. So, well, let's see if that actually ultimately ends up being the case or not. But aside from all this stuff, you also have Ryan get invited to a lunch by her mom, well, Jada, and she brings Sophie along as a date, which I love that, like, it's like, right, I have to remind you, all this happened because you steered the hornet's nest, Alice, by telling Ryan about her mom. She's kind of like, yeah, whatever. You're blaming me for that, and here you are getting all dolled up for your date with Ryan. It's like, no, it's not a date. It is kind of a date. Obviously, Mary and Luke aren't too happy. I mean, Ryan's got to do everything she can, because got to find out what Jada really knows and what she's up to, especially because it's like, right, Alice did find the connection between the Black Glove. What's that their name again? I'm already blanking on it. That secret society, as well as Jada with the whole Victor Freeze's like freeze serum. But it's like, right, it's not just, she already caused enough devastation to the point, like, people are quitting Wayne Enterprises. They're down, what was it, like 50% or something like that. Like, Wayne Enterprises has never been in this position. But, because also, like, she's been in crisis mode a little bit, like, as Ryan is trying to, like, appease people, be like, no, of course I wouldn't use your money to do this. So, like, she's got to handle a lot of that. It's kind of sad, like, all this kind of got thrust upon you. It's supposed to be kind of like a parting gift from Kate for you to take over things. But obviously, your biological mom, for her own reasons, kind of basically torpedoed your life a bit. But, get invited over to dinner. And the moment the guy cuts the pig, I was like, wait, are we doing this? I was like, because I think I remember, because I didn't catch the episode title, but I'm sure it has to deal with him, Professor Pig. But I'm like, I think I remember reading something. It might have been a Google alert referencing, like, Professor Pig was going to be in this, which, the other thing I was referencing about Gotham, that's a villain I knew nothing about until he popped up in Gotham. That's a weirdo. When you think about weirdos like Calendar Man, Kite Man, Condiment King, and then, like, Professor Pig. Which I like that it did add this element of, like, it was like this, serial killer thriller episode I thought was kind of interesting. Like, this would be something you see in, like, a horror movie thriller, like a You're Next or Strangers type of thing of, like, oh, here you are in the mask, and they're all, like, paralyzed from a paralysis. I mean, it's so interesting because, like, I thought it was, well, I'm all over the place. I do apologize, but I did think it was sweet, Sophie and Ryan's story about, like, oh, like, they were, like, making their story up. But Ryan's like, yeah, Sophie's the type that, like, if you were there dying, that you could lean on her shoulder and she would tell you everything's okay. It's like, of course you'd say that because, you're speaking from personal experience. Which I didn't even think about that at the time. I'm surprised that, like, so remembering where Sophie and Ryan were, like, last season, like, for there to be a budding relationship between them speaks volumes. But it's like, Sophie sees Ryan for who she is, and Ryan sees Sophie for who she is. So it's like, it's there, it's bubbling. Whether they actually, cross that line, we'll see. But it's definitely a budding romance there, which I think is really sweet. But circling back to it, like, the fact is Marcus was kind of flying off the handle, getting pissed at Ryan being like, oh, you're here having a secret meeting with my mom. But like, I did like that Ryan had her moment to kind of tell her mom off. It's like, oh, I'm so grateful you gave me up, because I found, essentially she's like, I thrived. I found a place I belong. Like, I found a mother who actually loved me. I have this wonderful life, because and it's like, yeah, probably it's like, if it wasn't for you too, like, she can't say it, but it's like, yeah, I probably wouldn't be Batwoman either. So like, there's so much, like, if you hadn't given me up, I wouldn't be. But you could tell it rubbed Jada the wrong way. But then you also had Marcus being like, oh, let me give a speech. But then all of them, like, the paralytic said it. And I thought that was so dope, because it added the creepy element of like, yeah, this is just a straight up, like, this ain't some, like, I mean, they've dealt with, like, trained killers like Victor Zsasz and stuff like that before, sure. But this is the first time where it's a situation where it's just like, right, like, Ryan nor Sophie are in fighting condition because of the paralytic. Even to the point, like, Marcus drunk the most, so his body's shutting down first, and like, it's literally like you gotta run for your life. You can't really defend yourself because you're not, once again, not in fighting condition. I was thinking like maybe Luke's going to show up, but it's like, well, he can't, because he's not really in a position to be in the Batwing suit right now. I was like, I thought he was going to like work around that, but it seems that's not the case. They were able to handle it on their own, but you immediately had like Sophie like not too happy about because she calls Jada out for like, right, the fact is your involvement with the freeze serum and everything, which she's like, which she legitimately had no idea what was going on. She had no idea about Jordan or the other victims, because, well, it's a thing of, you didn't know because you didn't want to know. You just wanted to get what you wanted. But at the end of the day, it's like, they also hid what they were up to, but it's still like, you could have asked more questions. You could have looked into it, but you didn't want to know. You wanted to get what you wanted and just move on. She's like, I didn't know what was happening. I'm not the monster you think I am. And I think that doesn't just apply. Because Sophie is coming from the perspective of like that, but also the fact is you gave up a wonderful person like Ryan. Like, you could have had an amazing daughter. You could have had an amazing person like her as a daughter and in your life, and you chose not to. You faked your own death. Like, so Sophie has layers to like her resentment towards Jada. But luckily, they took down Professor Pig. There's no more him in this continuity, because I'm assuming that this is supposed to be like his first time rising. I guess like Bruce never crossed paths with him, and it's just like, yep, just when he rose, he fell, because Marcus murdered him. So, I mean, not less, once again, we got plenty of juniors taking over the spots for their senpais when it comes to this villainy situation, the next generation. So there could be a Professor Pig in the future. So we'll have to wait and see. But Sophie definitely kept having this feeling, this gut feeling like Jada's hiding something. And we finally found out what it was. That Marcus is a sociopath, and you're like, oh, okay, I didn't expect that. But it kind of, when you look into the fact is how he easily snaps at, he also didn't seem too heartbroken, but I guess it's like, right, your own death is pending, but it's like, right, when he found out his girlfriend got murdered, that sucked. He didn't seem too disheartened by it, but it's like, right, like he doesn't really care. And that's what Jada's big secret has been. She's been hiding it. She's been trying to get him all the medical help. And I guess that's why she gave Ryan up, because she didn't want him to find out about his sister, because it's like, right, I can't bring a baby into this situation. We'd be having if you've seen the show Evil, we probably have an Eric situation on our hand. If you've never seen Evil, it won't mean anything, but if you've seen Evil, you know what I'm talking about. It probably would have been something of that nature, so it's probably even more so like, that's why she did what she did. Everything was not, it was to protect everyone, including like her daughter. So it's like, I never gave you up because I didn't love you. That's why I wanted to make sure, that's why she went through so much to even like hurt Ryan the way she has been business-wise, just to make sure she gets away from, because she did say, like, oh, we had another guest. I guess she didn't know who it was going to be, because she was shocked to see that it was Marcus. But it's like, right, we can't let Marcus know what's what. Because, basically the reason why he is the way he is the Joker, which I'm like, man, that guy is constantly screwing people up. I mean, it's like, well, if it wasn't for him, I mean, Scarecrow played his own part in it in Titans. I don't know if that's typically how it works in the typical Red Hood storyline, but we wouldn't have Red Hood if it wasn't for Joker bashing him in with a crowbar. So there's that element of it, which tying into the fact that potentially both Jokers in the Arrowverse as well as in Titans continuity, the Joker being dead, killed by Batman too, both times. So, but essentially, like the little buzzer he has, just did damage to a part of Marcus's brain, and he hasn't been the same. So he's like that. Oh, sociopath, like, I'm gonna kill animals. I'm gonna like pretend like it's just like recordings and stuff like that are just him doing some psycho stuff, and you're like, oh, cool. So that's what this about. And then he takes the blood and he spears on his face. I was like, yo! I was like, are we going there? Is he gonna be his own person, or is he gonna kind of fill the role of the Joker a little bit? Like, is that descent into madness going to like eventually control him? Like, I'm so interested. Like, it's showing like there's many different ways you can get there. Like the Gotham route took like the Jerome route to like the Jeremiah route. But part of me was wondering, like, are we going to do a little bit of a Joker situation, as in Joaquin Phoenix Joker, which it's still unclear because it's like how much of that movie you can take at face value. But potentially they set up in that movie that Arthur and Bruce are potentially half brothers. So that'd be interesting, making it so that Ryan and Marcus are half siblings. I think that'd be an interesting parallel if they did that, because it's like, right, her own personal joke. Because once again, because Batman and the Joker have always had that like symbiotic, like not symbiotic, but like, well, symbiotic to a certain extent, like that relationship, that dynamic, that tug of war between them has always been a big driving force between what makes them such a chaotic like combination of just like hero and villain. But then you add that element of being siblings, which I mean Clark had to go through that in Superman and Lois, dealing with his half brother himself. So like another parallel to draw. Damn, all these half siblings coming out of the woodwork being villains. But if Ryan has to deal with not only is it like, oh, he's his sociopath, he's also my half brother, then that's going to complicate things more, because it also changes things for you too. Not Ryan, but Jada has even more secrets. But for now, it seems like this is her big secret that you can't let anyone know. So is she going to let Sophie know? Because she looked into it by herself, so she might not let Sophie, Mary, or Luke know. Mary might need to know, because it's like, right, with her medical experience, like maybe she could do something to help, like maybe they can change the tides here. But then also Mary's going through what she's going through with the whole poison ivy thing, so that's probably not. I'm curious to see what Alice is going to think if she finds out, because it's like, oh, like, her way of understanding, because that was an interesting conversation too for her this episode. It's like, she's like, yeah, I've had my dissociative moments. We've seen said dissociative moments where she's seen like a young Kate inside of her head and stuff like that, and so on and so forth. But it's like, those were situations where she was in more control. This is different. But if she finds out about the Marcus thing, how that'll play out, it's definitely going to be interesting. I like the potential, like setting him up to be like essentially Ryan's Joker. So that's definitely going to be interesting. Like I said, if they go full throttle with it, or full throttle, or will it just be a situation of he'll just be his own thing? Because once again, it's just like, that's what they were initially going to do with Gotham, and they kind of do it with Joker of like, yeah, Arthur Fleck inspired other people. So the running theory, and the theory I've had, but other people have also had, like, it's not just my theory, I've definitely heard other people say it, that Arthur Fleck isn't the Joker that we know. He's just a dude that inspired the Joker. They kind of set that up in like when Jerome originally died in Gotham. They kind of set up a similar storyline, but ended up not going down that route. They probably weren't sure at that time what they were going to do with it, but I guess they like decided not to go down that route, and kind of went down the route that they ultimately went down. But yeah, a lot of really fascinating things. Man, the continuity just keeps getting wilder. Once again, just like Montoya and Poison Ivy. Definitely wouldn't have seen that coming. I guess, once again, it's just because like Harley and Poison Ivy are so damn good together in the Harley Quinn show that I can't imagine Poison Ivy with anyone else. So I think that's what kind of like adds that layer of that to me. Because I'm trying to think, like, I think that's the first relationship I've ever had experience with her. Like, once again, I'm not a comics person. Once again, the only other movie I know she's ever popped up in was Uma Thurman. I can never remember which Batman movie it is. I always get the titles confused. Batman and Robin, Batman Forever. I always confuse them. And I don't know. I don't think she was with anyone significantly in Gotham, to my knowledge. So that's like the first relationship of hers I can think of is her and Harley from the Harley Quinn show. But regardless, it's definitely gonna be interesting to see. Now that Montoya knows, like, potentially, Alice can take advantage of, like, I could use this information to get what I want. I can finally get my vacation that she's trying to get. But if she can use this to her advantage to manipulate Montoya the way she pull on her heartstrings in this regard and use her own regrets against her, because Alice is very good at getting inside of people's heads and using it against them. So it's definitely going to be really interesting to see where the next episode takes us going forward with all of this. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. To the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.